right, Mike Greenberg and Hembo are here. I have the digital version of Got Your Answers, but I have this big old bookshelf right here. Have the first one, Got Your Number, a rollicking good read, as is this one. I read it this morning. There you go. Hey, there you go. And that's called salesmanship. What is going on, Mike Greenberg?
We're not playing games here, Clark. That's what's going on. We came ready. Hembo showed up with product. Here's what happened. So the book you just referenced, which was Got Your Number, right, we did a year and a half ago.
Yes, sir.
And it was a book that I would have loved reading when I was growing up. I loved reading about sports history. And that book was a combination of a sports history book and a little bit of debate, because people would debate over whether we chose the right people to embody the different numbers. And what we discovered was the overwhelming reaction we got was to the debate piece, which I think is instructive, for what we do for a living, what people like us do on shows like Get Up and this one and others, that people gravitate towards the debate. That's what they were into. So we said, okay, we're going to do a follow-up. Debate is going to be our guiding star. How do we get there? And it was actually Hembo's idea. Well, why don't we choose the 100 best sports debates and settle them? Yeah. And so that literally is what the book is. We pick 100 great sports arguments, and using Hembo's outstanding research and my somewhat self-important opinion, we settle them once and for all.
I do think, and I gave Hembo this feedback a couple months ago, and I forgot to review about it. All of the good golf courses, you didn't invite anybody else on. How could we know you're right?
Well, unfortunately, it is not my purview to do that. Okay. Our friends at Augusta National do not enable unaccompanied guest privileges.
Even with purchase of a book, because that would move some books.
I would do everything in my power. That isn't the best golf course I've played, by the way. But
we saw Cypress is number one.
Cypress is. Look, Augusta is like a religious experience. I'm not complaining about any of them. That section, golfers are an interesting little subgroup, like a subset of the universe, because like 90% of the people who read this book won't even notice that section, that list. But to the 10% who care, that's the only one they want to talk to me about.
It's all I care about. And also because we're such we have so much FOMO. Like the only thing I think of is, have I gotten an invite to any of these places? And I got one. I won't say what it is. I got one I had to turn down, but it was a New York one. But that's neither here nor there. Hembo, what was the biggest debate you had with Greeny during this process? Like, what was the one topic where you guys went back and forth on something?
Okay, so it's a great question. It's one we have fielded all over the place. I think the best part about this for me wasn't the contentious nature of anything that we did. It was the fact that we basically had 100 debates amongst ourselves. That's the fun part. Like, everyone likes to ask me about the process because, I'm the research guru that put a lot of this stuff together. And that's kind of how it works. Like, once we landed on the 100 questions that we wanted to answer, I basically came to Greeny with, in the case of a top 10 list, 15, 20, 25 options. And then Greeny and I basically did 100 different talk shows to be able to reach these conclusions. And in the end of the day, persuasion won. It wasn't a case in which, like, I won't see eye to eye on you because we came to X, Y, or Z conclusion. In many cases, like, we're doing the thing that we're hoping the book kind of engenders among sports fans. So for me, it has less to do with, like, where we got and a lot more to do with the journey, because that, in the end, is basically what this is. We wrote this book for sports fans just like us to have sports debates just like these.
So to be clear, there's two different kinds of questions.
Right.
There are ones where the answer is your opinion, and that's what Hembo's talking about. We just went back and forth and back and forth. But then there are others where the data tells you the answer. So I can tell you, I've been doing press for this thing pretty much nonstop for 3 days now. The one that has gotten, on a lot of talk shows, has gotten a lot of attention, particularly from our friend Mr. Feinbaum and a few others I've done in the southeastern part of the country, is why did we put Ohio State, Michigan? We listed the top 5 college football rivalries. Why did we put Ohio State, Michigan ahead of the Iron Bowl? So,
come on. It's no matter. It is 100% number one.
Well, it is number one. So number one is the Army-Navy game.
Okay.
Army-Navy
It's
game
ahead
dates back to 1890. The first ever football game that was played with helmets was the Army-Navy game in 1893. It has an entirely different level of history and meaning than any other rivalry in our country. That's number one. Number 2 and 3 were clearly going to be Ohio State, Michigan, and Alabama, Auburn. This is an example of the data driving it. So we decided the passion of the fan bases is a wash. The heated nature of the rivalry is a wash. So Hembo went back and found out what the stakes of the games were. What were the consequences of the winning? And the reality is the winner of the Ohio State-Michigan game wound up in the Rose Bowl / winning some sort of national championship / qualifying for the BCS or college football playoff so much more frequently than the winner of the Iron Bowl. Right. That's what we use to break the tie. The game may not be more important, but it was more important, if you understand what I'm saying. It had actual greater meaning beyond the rivalry itself. And so that's an example of the data gave us the answer. So some of them are opinion, and some of them, most of them, in fact, the ones I like the most are the ones where Hembo was able to prove it. We can say this argument is settled now, and here's why.
It's interesting because, first of all, on the college football topic, I would stump for Florida State, Miami, and Florida State if you're going by consequences, because for about 15 years, those teams are playing semifinals against each other, and the winner got to the national championship game. So, like, that's one thing I would talk about with stakes. Obviously, I'm a homer from being from Orlando and being in the center of all that, but those are some games. But the two I took issue with, number one, was the drama sports movies. Leaving off, and I think everyone's going to say Field of Dreams. They're just going to mention that. But I would also say The Program is in the mix there, and I would say Any Given Sunday. Both classic, hardcore football movies that I think cut to the heart of what it is to be a football player, more than like Jerry Maguire necessarily, okay? And then the other one is the sports months, because I believe you had October number 1, April number 2. I believe, Greeny, that any month with football is better than any month without football. I understand the Masters. I understand the Final Four. I understand opening day. Football overall.
So I need page numbers. So the one thing we didn't do was a table of contents. Let's attack those one at a time.
Yes.
So
here, I'll get this right here.
The sports movies. There's nothing that people love more than debating.
163.
I got it. I found it. Thank you. I just, by luck, found it. I just have to say this, and you know I love you, Clark. Any Given Sunday sucks.
Oh, no. Wrong.
Sucks. Nothing looks less like football. Is that the Al Pacino movie?
Yeah, it's the Al Pacino movie.
That movie sucks.
Life's a game of inches, Greeny. Sounds like you don't know that.
I worked with Mike Golick for 18 years. He played in the NFL for 9 years. He lived to obliterate that movie. He hated that movie more than anything. So the football movies, I'm just looking at the football movies that are on here. So we have Remember the Titans at number 2. Remember the Titans is
great movie.
A magnificent movie. Heaven Can Wait, which I know is a very old, by
I've seen it.
Most people's standards movies, with Warren Beatty. I'm old enough to remember when it was in the theaters and all that stuff. That is a fabulous movie. And Brian's Song, the original, not the remake, which to this day I cry when I watch it. When Billy D. Williams says, "I love Brian Piccolo," it is one of the great moments. I genuinely believe it's one of the most beautifully delivered lines certainly in any sports movie. So which ones are you telling? And I guess Jerry Maguire is sort of a football movie.
I would take off. So I've never seen Breaking Away. I know my old boss, Bill Simmons, loves Breaking Away. Maybe it's an age thing. I've just never seen it. It's never connected with me. I will say this about Brian's Song. I've gotten some heat on this. So we did a thing at The Ringer years ago about best dad movies of all time. And you know what dad movies are? Movies, Ford versus Ferrari. The books we read, all this crap back here where it's like nonfiction, war, president type stuff. So we're doing dad movies. And we said Brian's Song was not a great dad movie. I'm not sure I've ever gotten more feedback in my life on a take. I still hear from people saying, you left off Brian's Song from the ultimate dad movies list. You should be in prison. I get that. I wrote it 5 years ago. I still get it. So maybe it's a me problem. Maybe I'm not sentimental enough. I'm taking those two off the list. I'm putting Field of Dreams. I can make a case for, but I'm going with those two football movies I mentioned.
So we didn't put Field of Dreams on here, much to Hembo's dismay.
I am with Hembo on this.
Hembo, so Grant, you could see Hembo is a Vulcan. He has no human emotion except when it comes to baseball.
Right.
When it comes to baseball and nostalgia, which is ironic because Field of Dreams is a great example of what you were saying in a different way, a dad movie, like a child and a father bonding over their love of baseball, which is ironic because I know Hembo's father. He doesn't know anything about American sports. Could not care. His father is from Lebanon and doesn't know the first thing about baseball, nor does he care in the slightest. But Hembo, we're up to you. You definitely would have put Field of Dreams on here.
On it. Although I will say this about Field of Dreams. When they represent Shoeless Joe Jackson batting right-handed, I mean, it's one of the great injustices in history because Babe Ruth once said of Shoeless Joe Jackson, who famously swung left-handed, his swing is the perfectest. That's the word he used to describe. So the fact that I have to watch him take BP batting right-handed is a disgrace. And so for that reason alone, I suppose I'll give you a pass.
Here's another controversial take for you. Kevin Costner has two big baseball movies. Mm-hmm. Field of Dreams is the second best one.
I can see that take. I just saw somebody the other day. I think it was
it's a better movie.
Christian Yelich the other day, I don't know if you saw it, said Bull Durham is the most accurate baseball movie. That is
most accurate.
That is minor league baseball. Still, Christian Yelich said this. This is not, someone from the 1982 AA season. Christian Yelich, so we're still living it. I want to get quickly to football right now. Hembo, are you happy that Greeny gets a good Jets team in his life?
Of course I am. Every person should at least have one chance in their lifetime to watch their team have a chance to go to the Super Bowl. And for the first time, I mean, Greeny's going to kick the can soon, and it's about time that he finally had that opportunity. Even if the Jets are interesting, which they've not been. They've been so bad that they've been uninteresting. They're not even interestingly bad. They've been uninterestingly bad. But seeing Mike Greenberg after the day in which Aaron Rodgers carved up the New England Patriots in a way that he's never seen without the television being black and white was something to behold sitting 6 feet away from him. So, yes, I'm happy. I don't want him to over-schmooze it. Like, we don't have to stretch it too far. But 1 year, this year, with it being one of the great quarterbacks of all time, I will certainly give him that hall pass.
I was getting texts from people. And by the way, I don't know if you have a time limit here, Clark, but I don't. So I have plenty of time. So don't feel like we need to rush off here. Hembo may have multiple infants to tend to.
I was saying earlier, I did the first episode with Joel McHale on this episode from my baby's nursery because we have construction in our house. I let my 19-month-old just walk around Westchester. He'll be fine. So we got plenty of time. I just left the door open and said, "Come back when I'm done."
Hembo's got his twin daughters, Michelle and the other one.
Okay.
And the new one, Cal Ripken. Babe Ruth Hembekides. He literally named his new daughter after Cal Ripken and Babe Ruth. But I digress. I was corresponding, as you might imagine, with a lot of fellow Jet fans during that game. And the overriding feeling amongst all of us was, I don't even know what to make of this. Like the really good Jet teams in my lifetime have all been defensive-oriented teams. The Rex teams, the Herman Edwards teams, the Sack Exchange teams. The Jets have not always been awful. The Jets don't major in always being terrible, although for the last 15 years you could argue they have been. But through the majority of my lifetime, they haven't been as bad as the Cleveland Browns have been and a few other teams. The Jets major in a very specific kind of agony. They major in like ripping your heart out of your chest when you least expecting it, setting fire to it, throw it on the ground, rolling a car over it to put the fire out, and that's what they do. The times that the Jets have been good, so the Sack Exchange teams, the Parcells team was actually probably the closest thing to having the best team in the league.
100%.
98, the Jets were really good. 99, if Testaverde doesn't blow out his Achilles in the first game untouched, I think the Jets had the best team in the NFL that year. The Herman Edwards teams were defense teams. The Rex Ryan teams were defense teams. So to have a team where the quarterback is running around and slinging it and we're converting third downs, I don't know what to do with that because I've never seen it before.
I've never seen it either. I think that it's sustainable. I think in a year where defense is taking over and there's 20 bad quarterbacks, that Aaron Rodgers playing like this, it changes. I thought there was no chance they could be on the A level of contenders. I've completely reconsidered after the other night. And like, I'm not saying, oh, the Patriots are so good, that was a quality win. No. The bar to clear was mobility. And he in an NFL game was rolling out of the pocket, and it was, I think, 5 of 5 on the run and 6 of 6 outside the pocket. Like, that is Super Bowl level stuff, Greeny.
And they converted 10 out of 15 third downs.
Yes.
A lot of it came on third down. So, yeah, I think we went into this season saying if Rodgers can just play well, some level of well, the Jet defense should be so elite that should be more than enough. They haven't been that. The Jet defense has not been nearly as good as I think they are, and as I
agree.
I hope they are. And hopefully that will improve over the course of time. And Hassan Reddick would be nice. It's starting to feel less and less likely now that he's ever going to come play for the Jets. Aaron Rodgers feels, comfortable taking shots at him and his agent.
Yeah.
So if the defense catches up to what I think it should be, and when we inevitably get Devontae Adams, which I think I've convinced myself is a fait accompli, I think they have a chance to be really dangerous.
I don't want to bring up old wounds, but what was the low point? Because I root for two teams, the Miami Hurricanes, the Orlando Magic, where I know I've hit rock bottom. And sometimes I think I've hit rock bottom, and then there's one loss worse than that. But like, when you're considering all of the 40 plus, 50 plus years of Jets fandom, what was the moment where you felt most hopeless?
So there's two separate answers to that. Yeah. The most painful times are not the hopeless times. Right. Because when the Jets have been so bad, to Hembo's point, that there is some level of apathy that creeps in. Not to say you ever stop caring, but you don't live and die with these games at some point because they just suck so much. So the worst of that definitely was Darnold into Zach. I mean, of course, the Jets in a span of 4 years drafted 3 years really, drafted 2 quarterbacks in the top 3. One of them was bad. The other one may literally have been the worst player ever. And it was none of it was their fault. Certainly look at Darnold now, and you give Zach Wilson a fighting chance. Who knows what he'll be. The Jet, their coaching, their organization, the ineptitude that was on display was so overwhelming that it genuinely made me want to break my hand the way athletes sometimes do by punching a wall. The most painful losses, however, are not those, of course. Right. For any fan, the painful losses are the ones where you think, oh my God, we've got a chance, and then it doesn't happen. So I'm thinking of the Nick Bryant game where he missed 2 field goals in a playoff game in Pittsburgh. I'm thinking way back to when Mark Gastineau roughed the passer on a 4th down when we absolutely would have beaten Cleveland and gone on to play Denver in the AFC Championship game. And instead, Cleveland went, and that was the game that became the drive by Elway. We wound up losing in double overtime in the second longest football game in NFL history, and my father threw a pillow out a 25th story window. Accidentally. And that was actually the day that I became impossibly superstitious. So the Jets are about to win that game. My father is on the phone with United Airlines. We are booking a flight to go to Denver the following week to watch the Jets play in the AFC Championship game. And Gastineau roughs the quarterback on 4th down. And they wind up coming back from 10 down in the 4th quarter and beating us in double overtime. And my father went to his grave convinced that we lost because we were on the phone with United Airlines. And honestly, I believe it too.
How does that manifest itself now? Like, you just don't make any plans, don't even think about the next round until
I don't let people move in the room when things are going well. I believe in all those superstitions, but I will say, Hembo is a very religious person, and I'm not. But when the year my dad died, I happened to go to Vegas. Mike and I were there for something, and I thought to myself, if there is an afterlife, if there's any truth to like spirits, in the universe, whatever it might be. Maybe this is the year. Wherever my dad is, he's going to make this thing happen. So I bet $1,000 on the Jets to win the Super Bowl. I think they went 4-12. I don't have the number. They stunk that year, and so that was when any chance there was of my coming over to Hembo's side in this definitely withered. But
you can't blame him, right? You can't blame him for abandoning religion with this story.
My father either. Let me look up what their record was that year.
They went 4-12.
What was the record of the 2016 Jets?
Oh, the 2016 Jets. Was that the Ryan Fitzpatrick year?
No, they weren't good. The Jets weren't good the year my father died.
Right. Okay.
The year that I bet on them, they weren't. The Ryan Fitzpatrick Jets were actually reasonably good.
Yeah.
Well, that year, Brandon Marshall and Eric Decker both had 1,000 yards, if memory serves.
Well, he should have bet on that.
Yeah, seriously.
Should have bet on that prop.
They finished 5-11. Sorry, 5-11. They finished 5-11 and a robust fourth in a 4-team AFC East.
It was a near miss. I think, Greeny. What a way to confirm that you weren't going to be religious for the rest of your life is Jets.
At age whatever I was, 49, I still had a chance.
All right, we do something called one rep back, and we have players that redo a play. Like J.J. Watt was on a couple months ago. He said he literally wanted to kill Tony Romo on a play, whiffed on him. Romo throws a touchdown. Just a play you'd love back. When we have media members, we do it for takes. If you could go back in all of your life and have one take back that you just missed on, Hembo, I'll start with you.
So Greeny and I have a legendary clip now that circulates on Dolphins Twitter anytime Tyreek Hill catches a touchdown pass that we've played back on the show many, many times, in which we just crush the Dolphins for doing the stupid team thing where you trade for the star wide receiver and you praise the Chiefs for doing the smart team thing and letting him go before he falls off of a cliff, and inevitably Tyreek Hill goes to Miami and has some of the great seasons ever, he's so good he gets Tua Tagovailoa generational wealth. And so anytime a good thing happens to Tyreek Hill, that recirculates on my timeline. So that's probably our most famous one in recent memory.
Let me tell you, I have 100 worse than that. So there are a couple that I could choose from. The most legendary season, or the most legendary thing in the early days of Mike and Mike, whatever year it was, the Ravens won the Super Bowl that they beat the Giants. I think it was the 2000 season into January of 2001.
Yep.
There are 10, in those days, there were 10 playoff games that led to the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. Mike and I did a feature called Stone Cold Lead Pipe Locks. We picked every game against the spread. I went 0-10. I went 0-10 against the spread in that postseason. I defy you, Clark, to find anyone else who could do that. I defy you to find someone who could do that purposely. I went 0-10 for that NFL postseason. So that counts as a take. But that was pretty bad. I guess
Tell me about after Bledsoe got hurt in 2001. Didn't you have like a Brady Belichick thing that?
Not Brady. Brady was no one at that time. It wasn't even a prediction. I said, oh, well, obviously Belichick's going to get fired after this year. Yeah. He didn't have anything going in Cleveland. He was a bad head coach. I obviously had a bias against him because of the whole HC of the NYJ thing, but I actually believed it. I didn't think he was a good head coach. I thought they had made a mistake. I actually thought it was going to wind up being a good thing that the Jets, that he didn't wind up being the head coach of the Jets. And then they went, I want to say they went like 5-11 his first year in New England. And then his second year, 2 games in, they lose the quarterback, and a guy no one had ever heard of named Tom Brady comes out onto the field. And I went on the air the next day and I said, look, clearly they made a mistake here. Bill Belichick will get fired after this season. So that's a pretty bad one.
I think the jury's still out. He did get fired.
That one was off. Yes, I was only 20, whatever it is, 20.
Never wrong, just early. It's fine.
So that was a pretty bad take.
I'd say. Why should you bet with Caesars Sportsbook? 2 words. Caesars Rewards. Every bet brings you closer to the types of benefits only Caesars can offer. Hotel stays, VIP experiences, sports and concert tickets, and more. It's not just an app, it's an empire. Greeny, you're doing the First Draft podcast with Mel Kiper and Field Yates. I know it's early. Give me your hottest draft take. Give me the take right now when you're watching film you're most convicted of right now.
Well, I mean, I will say based on the jacket that I see you wearing, and let me make it very
fishing
clear.
For something.
I am not an analyst. I ask the questions.
Yes.
So I can tell you that there is a great deal of sentiment that Cam Ward could wind up being someone whose name we hear very early on that Thursday night in Green Bay. People love him. The big take going into this weekend is whether or not Jalen Milroe, with a really big game against Georgia, can catapult himself into the first half of the first round, let's say. I don't know that Milroe can become a top 5 pick. Stranger things have happened.
Sure.
But I don't get a sense that that's what my guys are thinking. But I do think that a really good performance could catapult him into the top half of round 1, let's say. So that would be a good one for this weekend.
I also think that the way, like Michael Penix in early December was being talked about as a 3rd-round pick. And then all of a sudden in the playoffs, he moves up. Quarterbacks, and they always say this, once coaches get involved, the quarterbacks skyrocket because they fall in love with certain traits or they fall in love with the personality, which was happening in Atlanta. And all of a sudden they skyrocket. The thing with Cam Ward is teams are going to fall in love with him for a couple of reasons. Number one, his coolness and calmness in the pocket is unlike anything I've ever seen. And I was in Gainesville when they played in week 1 in Florida against Florida. And I have a friend who was on the sideline, and he said that there was someone with the team who came over to him after the first drive of the game and said, "This game's over. We're going to win." And my friend said, "What? Wait, okay. It's 7-0. We're a good start." And he goes, Cam Ward is the calmest guy in the stadium right now, and you can see it. And he doesn't. Everybody else's hands are shaking. Cam's just out there playing pitch and catch. And I think when teams start to see that moxie, and the thing he's doing now, where he's telling the defense where the play is going, like I've never seen anything like this. Like this is moxie on an unprecedented level. I think teams are going to fall in love with that as long as the tape continues to excel. That's my Cam Ward take.
Can I give you one more?
Yeah.
Hembo, I think you'll find this interesting. We record that First Draft podcast on Wednesdays, and it gets released on Thursday. So this week's is available right now. And in it, you will hear Mel Kiper make an interesting point. Mel remains steadfast that the number 1 pick in this draft, well, not the number 1 player, but based upon the fact that he's a quarterback, the QB1 should be Shedeur Sanders. And I know there are a lot of people who have a lot of questions. I see the look on your face. Now, let me say to you what he said to Field and me yesterday, and tell me if it changes your mind. Put Shedeur Sanders on Texas, and how would he look? Put Quinn Ewers on Colorado, how would he look? Put Shedeur Sanders on Georgia, how would he look? Put Carson Beck behind that offensive line that he's playing with, and how would he look? And maybe that should have been an obvious thought, but I hadn't considered it. And when he said it, that really struck me, that Shedeur Sanders he's doing a lot. I don't want to say with a little, because obviously Travis Hunter is a great player, but there were going to be Shedeur Sanders detractors because of his dad and all of that stuff. But that thought really resonated with me, that when you consider the line he's playing behind and all of that.
That's a good point.
How would these other guys look if they were there, and how would he look right now if he was playing in one of these other offenses?
It's like the most difficult thing to do in quarterback evaluation is trying to context neutralize it, because they're all doing the same job in such vastly different circumstances. Like, we'll use Dak Prescott as an example, who had Mississippi State ranked highly during his time in college, and we know now that it was all him and not the team. Whereas so many of these, we'll call them anointed quarterbacks, the Trevor Lawrences of the world, the quarterbacks that come from the universities with all of the very best players surrounding them, it's so hard to compare them like for like. And so the Shedeur Sanders point is a good one. It's my opinion that he makes his offensive line look worse than it is. It's also my opinion that if he were on Georgia, that team would be a wagon. So it's a well-made point by Mel. It's the most difficult part of quarterback evaluation is neutralizing the playing field.
There was a Joe Burrow clip I saw over the summer that has blown my mind. I've been thinking about it ever since. And I ran it past a couple GMs and they said, we think about this all the time, where the best quarterbacks, they don't come from the Georgias of the world. They don't come from, the 13-0 Florida State, whatever. They come from Texas Tech. They come from Wyoming. And the reason is Joe Burrow thinks is those guys had to learn how to win. Those guys had to say, I'm going to put the entire team on my back and figure out how to eke out a 55-52 game instead of throwing your 8th touchdown pass when it's a 56-10 against Mississippi State, right? And so I do think there's an element of that where it's like Shedeur Sanders is going through things Carson Beck will never have faced by the time they get to the NFL. It is they're having two completely different quarterbacking experiences right now. And I'd say the same, Cam Ward has a great offensive line. He has great skill guys everywhere. It is completely different. The difference is he played at Washington State, an incarnate word beforehand, and he knows a lot about putting an entire student body on his back. So it's
Burrow said that?
Joe Burrow said that, yes.
An interesting thing considering his receivers were Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson.
I think he thinks about the game in an interesting way. And, he transferred and he faced adversity. He wasn't a starter.
I'm not saying no. Yeah. I'm just saying, he's arguing against, he's making the argument against people like exactly him. He was the quarterback of the greatest college offense in the history of the sport.
That's a sign of a future very good media member. I'll say that. Hembo, get me out of here on this. I live in Yankees country. I went to one Yankees game. I'm a Yankees fan because I have a Yankees hat somewhere around here. Catch me up very quickly in the MLB playoffs and what the Yankees are going to do.
So the Yankees have a good enough lineup to win it all. They have a good enough starting rotation to win it all. But like most teams in the month of October, it's going to exclusively come down to what happens in the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings. And so if the Yankees wind up not reaching the top of the mountain, it is very likely to look the same way that it has looked for the last few months, which is a helpless Clay Holmes on the mound in a high leverage situation instead of Tommy Kahnle or Luke Weaver or a more qualified reliever to get those outs. And so that would be my one thing as a Yankees fan. I trust the lineup. It's a lot deeper with Austin Wells and Jazz Chisholm. I trust the depth of my starting rotation, even without Nestor Cortez. I don't, for the life of me, trust the guys to get the last 9 outs of the game and over the course of the best of 3, 5, and 7 game series, especially at the end of those series. That's always what winds up being the undoing of teams that fail to reach the top of the mountain.
Well, I just hope they can cash in for long-suffering fans like myself. Mike Greenberg, Hembo, it's got your answers. It's available wherever books are sold. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Good to talk to you, Clark.